I didn't even get the chance to sit down before he ended it. The cafe was packed, soft jazz drifting from overhead speakers, the scent of espresso and overpriced desserts hanging in the air. I had barely taken 2 steps toward the table when James looked up from his untouched cappuccino and said, "We need to talk." My stomach dropped. I remember his voice, flat, almost rehearsed. Still, I sat. My palms were already damp. "What's going on?" I asked, forcing a smile. "Is this about the caterer?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, not to give to me, but to take something back. "I can't marry you, Amelia," he said, just like that. 7 words, sharper than any scalpel I'd ever held. "What?" I whispered. He leaned back in his chair like honesty had finally set him free. "It's not you. It's just, we're heading in different directions. I've made new connections. Important ones. Megan Langley, daughter of Gregory Langley, the venture capitalist, who practically owned half the West Coast's tech startups." My chest tightened. "You're leaving me for her?" "It's not like that," he said. "But it clearly was. This is better for both of us. You deserve someone simpler." He didn't even flinch as I stared at him, stunned and silent, trying to make sense of how the man I was supposed to marry in 16 days could erase me so completely. And then, as if he hadn't gutted me enough, he added, "Also, the ring. It's a family heirloom. My grandmother would be devastated if it left the family." I slipped it off. My hands were shaking, but I did it. Gently, I placed it on the table between us. "Thank you for your honesty." Then I stood up and walked out past the glass doors, past a couple sharing desserts, past the curious eyes trying to figure out what just happened. I didn't cry until I turned the corner onto Elm Street, and I didn't go back to the apartment we shared. I couldn't face the half-packed boxers, the dress hanging in the closet, the silence. But when I arrived, it was already done. My things were packed into labeled suitcases by the door, clothes, books, toiletries, all neatly sorted, like I was being returned to sender. Not by James. He wouldn't be that considerate. It had to be his mother. I sat on the floor beside those bags for I don't even know how long. My old studio lease had ended. I'd handed it off to a nursing student just weeks ago. Every cent I'd saved was spent on a wedding that would never happen. I had less than $100 in my account, and a week until payday. That's when I did the one thing I hadn't done in over a year. I called my foster mom. Margaret Temple answered on the 3rd ring, her voice warm and steady, just like always. "Amelia, honey, where have you been? I was just about to call you about those shoes we looked at last week." I couldn't speak. All I managed was a sob. That was enough. An hour later, I was curled up on her faded plaid couch, cradling a mug of peppermint tea, while she smoothed my hair like she used to when I was 13. Heartbroken after another failed placement, Margaret didn't ask questions. She just laid a thick knit blanket over my legs and said, "Stay as long as you need, you hear me? I've got space and you've got nothing to prove." That night, I didn't sleep. I lay there on the old pull-out couch in her living room, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of that conversation with James, his calmness, how he didn't even hesitate. Had he ever really loved me? Or was I just a placeholder, until someone with a name like Langley came along? By morning, the pain had dulled into something heavier, something closer to shame. I was supposed to be stepping into a new life, a new chapter, a family of my own. Instead, I was right back where I'd started. 20-8, heartbroken, homeless, humiliated. At noon, I showered, got dressed, and returned to the hospital like nothing had happened. Nurses smiled. Some asked about the wedding plans. I smiled back, nodded, lied, because telling the truth felt like it would tear me wide open. But as I pulled on my scrubs and checked my patient list, I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't stay here. Not in this town. Not with these memories. Not while James Miller and Megan Langley toasted champagne to their aligned futures just across the state line. Not when I had nowhere else to go on. Nothing left to lose. 3 days passed. 3 long, aching days of going through the motions on the hospital floor, trying not to unravel. I smiled when people asked about the wedding. I said it was postponed. I said James had a last-minute business trip. I said I was fine. I said too much. On the 3rd day, as I checked in for a patient in room 8, Rachel Orr Blunt, no-nonsense charge nurse, poked her head in. "You still looking for a miracle escape from this place?" I blinked. She waved me into the hallway and lowered her voice. You remember Lily from Neural? She took a private care job last month, live-in, high pay. She quit last week, said she couldn't handle the guy. What guy? Rachel raised an eyebrow. Some tech mogul, paralyzed, lives up in Cypress Hill, in one of those who even builds these kind of mansions. Word is, he's a nightmare. Sounds lovely, pays triple what we make, live-in suite, meals included, no roommates, no night shifts, just one patient. I hesitated. I'm not a caregiver. You're a nurse with 5 years of experience, she snapped. You're more qualified than half the people they've hired. And honestly, this guy scares most of them off in 2 weeks. But you're stubborn. That might actually work in your favor. I almost laughed. I didn't feel stubborn, I felt shattered. But that word she used as capit echoed. Do you have a contact? I asked. 10 minutes later, she handed me a small card. A name was written on it in elegant cursive, Margaret Temple, estate manager, and a number. It took me until midnight to call. I stood outside in Margaret's backyard, coat wrapped tight, cold Montana air filling my lungs, phone shaking in my hand. She picked up on the second ring. Hello, this is Amelia Carter, I said. I was told there's a position open for a live-in nurse. A pause. Then, are you available for an interview tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock? I blinked. Yes, I can be there. Bring your credentials and references. The address will be texted shortly. Do not be late. The line went dead. At 4:30 a.m., I caught the earliest flight out of Helena to San Francisco, then connected to a regional shuttle that climbed the winding hills of Cyprus until the rest of the world fell away. It all felt like a dream I hadn't earned. Then, I saw the house. It looked like a fortress, glass and steel carved straight into the cliffside, sharp lines catching the morning light like a blade. A black gate swung open as my cab approached, and for a split second, I wanted to ask the driver to turn around. Too late. Margaret Temple met me at the front door. A woman in her 60s, wiry and stiff-backed, her silver hair pulled into a perfect twist. Her navy blue suit didn't have a single wrinkle. She gave me a once-over, sharp and practiced, someone who'd worked in either the military or a hospital. You're early, she said. I didn't want to be late. Good, follow me. The interview was swift. She skimmed my resume, asked for clipped questions, didn't smile once, and finally said, the position is yours, Miss Carter. The terms are simple. Round-the-clock availability, 2 days off per month, no visitors, medical experience is essential. Discretion is non-negotiable. Your patient is a complicated man. You'll live on the second floor, adjacent to his suite. Meals and lodging included. Salary, $12,000 a month, plus a performance bonus depending on his condition's progression. I gripped the arms of the chair to keep from laughing out loud. It was more than 3 times what I'd made at the hospital. I didn't have a plan, just an overstuffed duffel bag and a bleeding heart, but I said yes. Without hesitation, she slid a folder across the table. This is your contract. Review. It's before tomorrow. Your patient is Mr. John Hale. The name meant nothing to me then. It would soon mean everything. The next morning, I stood outside his door, folder in hand, heart thudding. The hallway was wrapped in that kind of thick carpet that swallows every sound. Everything in the house was clean, cold, and sharp stone floors, expensive silence, and straight lines that didn't bend for comfort. Margaret stood beside me, clipboard pressed to her chest. You're sure you want this? She asked without looking at me. I signed the contract. That's not what I asked. I swallowed. Yes. She knocked twice and opened the door without waiting for a response. The room was huge, vaulted ceilings, glass walls overlooking redwoods, sunlight bleeding across pale hardwood floors. It didn't feel like a bedroom. It felt like a throne room built for a ghost. He sat by the window in a sleek black wheelchair. His back to us, Mr. Hale. Margaret said crisply, your new nurse has arrived, Amelia Carter. He didn't turn right away. Just tapped his fingers slowly against the armrest. Then finally, he pivoted on. My breath caught. I don't know what I expected. Someone older, maybe frail, but John Hale was in his mid-30s, tall, even-seated, dark hair, jawline sharp as glass, and yet there was something haunted in his face. His skin was pale, his frame lean, but his eyes, his expression warned me. He looked at me like I had already failed him. So he said, voice low and sharp, they sent me another one. I opened my mouth, but he cut me off. What's the bet this time, Margaret? A week? 10 days? She didn't answer. I'll leave you two to get acquainted, she said, then left, closing the door behind her. Silence stretched. I'm not here to place bets, I said at last. I'm here to do my job. He rolled a few feet closer, examining me like I was some art piece he didn't like. And what job do you think that is? Medication, physical therapy, monitoring, vitals, supporting rehab. He snorted. You forgot the part where you nod sympathetically while I fail to walk. That's everyone's favorite. I'm not here to pity you. He tilted his head slightly. Oh, that's new. Most of them crack by day 3. Maybe I'll surprise you. Maybe, he said, but the smirk said he didn't believe it. The day passed in stiff silence. I gave him his meds, reviewed his therapy plan, took notes. John threw sharp jabs, trying to provoke me, but I didn't bite. I'd worked with veterans, missing limbs, teenagers screaming through every injection, mothers who cried through morphine highs. John Hale wasn't going to scare me. That evening, while prepping his room for the night, he spoke suddenly. You're not what I expected. I looked up. No, you haven't asked about the accident. I figured you'd tell me if you wanted to. Another pause. Another surprise. Ski trip, he said finally. Solo. Lost control on a ridge. Woke up in a helicopter. Haven't stood unaided since. Thank you for telling me. He stared at me for a long moment. Why'd you take this job? I needed it. Not the money. Why this job? I met his eyes. Because I've been lied to. Because I know what it feels like to be thrown away. Something shifted in his face. A crack in a wall that was never meant to open. Then he turned back to the window. Don't get attached, he said. I don't do gratitude. I don't do friendship. Good, I replied. I don't do illusions. He didn't answer, but he didn't send me away either. It happened on the 5th night. I wasn't supposed to be awake, but the wind outside had howled for hours, rattling the windows like a ghost. Couldn't decide whether to come in or stay out. I got up to close the blinds and saw the light on in the West Wing gym. John never let anyone in there alone. I told myself he'd fallen asleep watching TV, but something in me, quiet, instinctive, said otherwise. I threw on a sweater and crept through the hall, easing the gym door open just enough to peek in, and froze. John was standing, not fully, not freely, but standing, gripping parallel bars, arms trembling with effort, sweat dripping from his jaw. His legs shook, but he was doing it slowly, painfully, step by agonizing step. He didn't see me at first, too focused. Then the door creaked. He turned and rage swallowed his face. What the hell are you doing? He snapped. I heard something. I thought, get out, John, now. But I didn't move. Not frozen, just ... changed. He wasn't hopeless. He was hiding progress. Why? I asked softly. Why keep this a secret? His hands gripped the bars harder. Because the second people see progress, they expect miracles. That's not how healing works. He let out a bitter laugh. But that's how disappointment works. People walked away when I didn't rise from the chair like some miracle man. I'm not doing that again. So instead you pretend there's nothing left. That you've given up. His jaw clenched. You don't get it. Maybe I do, I said gently. His eyes locked onto mine, furious, uncertain. I won't tell anyone, I said, but if you let me help, really help, we can work towards something better. You don't have to do this alone. Why? He demanded. Why do you care? Because I know what it's like to have your future ripped out from under you, ... and be expected to smile through the pieces. He stared at me, breath heavy, sweat shining on his skin. I thought he'd scream, or fire me, but he lowered himself back into the chair, quiet and spent. Finally, he muttered, Fine. My heart jumped. We keep this between us, he said. No one knows. I understand. And you follow my lead. I say stop, we stop. I say, go, you help. Agreed. He studied me, something shifting, something unspoken. You're not like the others. I'm not trying to be. We started the sessions the next morning, early, quiet, before Margaret stirred, before sunlight reached the kitchen tiles. Each step was a war-controlled, excruciating, a battle between gravity and sheer willpower. But he did it. And I was there not to cheer, not to cry, just to stand beside him. It began with a voice. I was organizing meds when I heard it, deep, confident, the smooth, male, not John, not staff, curious. I followed the sound to the west sitting room. There, Lounging on the leather couch was a man in his early 40s, expensive watch catching the morning sun, holding a drink that definitely wasn't juice. Double quotes. John, you look like hell, he laughed. John, across from him, managed a thin smile. Good to see you too, David. That was my introduction to David Thornjan's longtime business partner, the man who, according to Margaret, had stepped in to run Hale Nexus Technologies after the accident. Something about him made my skin crawl. Maybe it was the way he looked at John like he still owned the pieces, measuring his worth. Or maybe it was the way his eyes found mine when I walked in with the tea tray slow, assessing, invasive. This the new one? He asked. Amelia Carter, I said evenly, setting the tray down. She any better than the last three? David quipped, taking a sip. She's not here to entertain you, John said coldly. She's my nurse. The conversation shifted to business mergers, investor pressure, government contracts. I tried to blend into the background, invisible, but then one word stopped me. Cold. Langley. David leaned in, voice low. Elena says her father's ready to move the funds. We just need the control package transferred to the shell. Langley Capital will absorb it. He's got friends on the tech board. Easy in jaw. John didn't respond. He stared out the window, knuckles white against the chair's armrest. I've already prepped the docs, David went on. Just need your signature. I'll review them, John said. You've been saying that for weeks. If we wait any longer, we'll miss the window. John stayed silent. My heart pounded in my chest. I slipped out before either of them noticed I was still there. Langley. Elena Langley. That name still echoed in my memory. Then it hit me. Langley, capital Elena. David pushing for John's signature. The company? They were trying to take its strip control while John was still healing. And if Elena was involved, Megan Langley couldn't be far behind. My chest tightened. As I returned to my room and shut the door, was this connected to what happened to me? Was I just a bystander caught in something much bigger? Or had they chosen me on purpose because I was the kind of girl no one would suspect? That night, couldn't hold it in. While helping John with his stretching exercises, I finally broke the silence. I overheard something today about your company. He didn't look at me. Go on. I told him everything, names, phrases, tone. I even mentioned Megan Langley. At that, he paused. You know her. My ex-fiancé left me for her. He blinked slowly. James Miller. I nodded. You know him? No, but I've heard the name. Through David. He rolled away from the wall and looked at me. So, you think my business partner and your ex, they're what? Working together? I think it's too much of a coincidence. He didn't answer for a long time. Then finally, I'll go through the documents. That was it. I tried not to feel crushed. I'd hoped for more belief, maybe even action. But John just retreated into silence, like my words vanished into thin air. That night, I paced my room like a trapped animal. Was I wrong, seeing things that weren't there? Or worse, was I right, and no one would believe me? The next morning, he knocked on my door. He never knocked. When I opened it, John was in his wheelchair, a folder resting on his lap. You were right, he said. Langley Capital isn't just investing. The paperwork hands over ownership and decision-making to a holding company David created 2 months ago, buried under layers. My breath caught. I want you to help me stop them. He held out the folder. Are you sure? I asked. After everything. John nodded. If they think I'm too broken to fight, then they've forgotten who I was before I fell. The plan took days to come together. Every night, after the staff had gone to bed and the windows turned black, we sat at the long oak table in the study, poring over documents and strategies. His hands sometimes trembled with fatigue, but his voice stayed steady. He was building a war room brick by brick, and I was his only ally inside the walls. He'd already looped in his attorney. They were tracking everything: emails, contracts, bank trails. John hid nothing from me, not even his doubts. I trusted David more than anyone, he said one night. He was there the day I pitched my first app. He spoke for me when I couldn't stand on my own. And all this time, you were right to trust your gut, I told him. I was late to do it, he said. But I won't be late again. 1 week later, a surprise board meeting was called. No one suspected a thing. John let David believe the signature was coming, even sent him a thank you email for managing things so smoothly. That same afternoon, John suited up. It was the first time I'd seen him in a full tailored suit, midnight blue. He looked sharp, handsome, in a way that made my heart pause. His body was still healing, but the way he held himself upright, steady, shifted the entire energy of the room. He practiced walking with a cane, 10 steps, then 15, then 20. I want them to see it, he said, with their own eyes. On the day of the meeting, we arrived 15 minutes early. The building gleamed all glass and chrome, and the silence felt thick. Heads turned as we walked in. John beside me, jaw set, every step deliberate, strong. In the boardroom, silence cracked like thunder. David sat at the head. Alina was there too, in a dove-gray suit, legs crossed, lips painted like war. James sat beside her. He looked smaller than I remembered. Still handsome, still smug, but something about him felt off, like something borrowed and never fully returned. Then John entered, cane in hand. The silence snapped. "You're walking," David said. "Not perfectly," John answered, "but enough." He didn't take a seat at the far end. He walked straight to the head of the table, stopped, and locked eyes with David. "This meeting is under my authority now," he said. "Come, steady, and I'll begin with this." He opened a folder and laid out everything: the forged trails, the hidden clauses, the proof of David's attempt to sell off Hale Nexus, technologies to a shell company tied to Langley Capital. Elena didn't blink. James shifted, uncomfortable. David's face drained of color. "You can't prove intent," David muttered. "I don't need to," John replied. "Just breach of fiduciary duty." "And I just did." The board stirred. The general counsel stood. "Mr. Hale, would you like to request an immediate vote of no confidence?" "I would," John said. "Effective immediately." Chaos broke out. Alina stood first, her heels sharp against the floor. "You have no idea who you're messing with, John." "Oh, I do," he said softly. "A woman who hides behind her father's name, and a man who sells out everything for a shortcut." She scoffed. "And your nurse? What now?" "She's your co-founder." John turned to me. "She's the reason I'm standing here at all." James looked down. The board voted. It was unanimous. David removed. The contracts voided. Control restored. Once the room emptied, John and I stayed behind. He leaned on his cane, breathing heavily, but his eyes were bright. "You did it," I whispered. "No," he said. "We did." Then, just for a moment, he smiled wide, full, real. And I realized something I hadn't let myself believe until now. He wasn't the only one who had taken his first steps that day. Weeks passed. The mansion no longer felt like a mausoleum. Windows were open again. Light poured through the halls. Even the garden, once dry and forgotten, felt alive. John still had tough days, still limped, still braced against pain. But the bitterness that used to follow every step, it was fading. So was mine. I stopped mourning the wedding that never happened. The name I almost took, I let it go. I began seeing myself as more than someone left behind. I started reading again, running short laps on the trail behind the house, laughing, for no reason, without guilt. Once a week, John insisted on cooking, even though he burned rice, and cursed the stove like it owed him something. I let him. I sat at the island, legs tucked up, smiling through his frustration, that it became our ritual, simple, unspoken hours. One night, he handed me a dish I couldn't identify and said, "If this kills you, I want it on record." I tried. "You'll get the company in the will." I joked. He paused. "Actually, no." I looked up. "I transferred it to a trust," he said. "One that includes you." What? I blinked. "I'm not giving you company," he said gently. "But I want you to know I've built something better with you than I ever did alone, and I want you to be part of what's next." Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black box. "Before you say anything," he said quickly, "you don't have to answer today, or this year. I know I'm still figuring out how to be a person again, and I know you didn't sign up for all of this." He opened the box. Inside was a simple gold ring with a single sapphire. "But I want to ask anyway," he said, voice low. "Will you consider walking this road with me? Not because I need saving, but because, with you, I remember who I am." I didn't cry. I thought I might, but instead, I felt something steadier, a quiet sense of arrival, like I'd walked through the darkest part of the forest and found, not a castle, but a clearing, a place to breathe again. I took the ring, slid it onto my finger. "I'm not saying yes," I whispered, smiling, "but I'm not saying no." He laughed. "That sounds exactly like you." We didn't rush. No headlines, no big announcements, just more mornings, more steps forward. John walked half a mile on his own. The following month, I passed my certification to open a private practice. We hired new staff. I stayed in the house, but it no longer felt like his, it felt like ours. As for James, he texted once, 2 lines, "Are you okay?" I never answered. I didn't need to, because I'd already taken everything I was meant to from that heartbreak. A lesson, a detour, a doorway to a life I hadn't dared to imagine. By fall, John had stopped using the chair completely. On his birthday, we drove up the coast, just us. We walked the beach at sunset, sand sticking to our feet, wind biting at our skin. At one point, he looked out at the ocean and asked, "You think we'll ever go back to who we were before all this?" I shook my head. "I hope not." He turned to me. I added, "Because who we became is better." He didn't say anything. He just reached for my hand and didn't let go.